But I want to start tonight with United States politics. And amid all the protests and violence and madness we've seen of late, the Trump derangement syndrome remains strong in the media. We might want, I'm certain actually, that we want the media to help provide context for events, share some relevant history and help us learn the lessons of the past. But we often get quite the opposite. The green left media, that is most of the media, just seems to fan the flames. It lives in the moment and perpetuates the paradoxes. They refuse to change, learn or admit error. Let me give you a recent little example. First, the history of this. Remember, just 4 years ago, the Democrats and the media, strung along artfully by Donald Trump, cranked up a story about how the Republican candidate might refuse to accept the election result if he lost. I mean, he wasn't in power, Donald Trump. They all said he'd lose anyway, but they still went with this yarn that he might imperil democracy by not accepting the result.
But, sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner, not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying.
OK, well, if you've got a memory span longer than Twitter, you'll also recall that when Trump confounded them all and won, it was the Democrats, the media and their activist friends who refused to accept the result.
Most demonstrations were peaceful, like this candlelight march through San Francisco. In Oakland, California, small groups of protesters set fires, burned flags, and damaged police cars. Before the election, the U.S. was a bitterly divided country. The outcome of Tuesday's vote has not helped matters.
Yep, they literally burned shops, smashed police cars because Trump won. Robert De Niro wanted to punch him, you'll remember. Madonna wanted to blow up the White House. And the Democrats and the media immediately went into wild claims about Russia and collusion and stolen elections and impeachment. They have never stopped. They've never accepted Trump's victory. So which side attacked the fundamentals of democracy? Which side refused to provide the loser's consent upon which democracy relies? And what role did the media play? Well, the reason I mention this is because armed with this recent knowledge, I mean, remembering back one election is beyond many in the media these days, I know, but with this in mind, I was staggered to see this little item on the ABC News last Friday night.
The former Vice President Joe Biden says his biggest worry is that President Donald Trump will try to steal the November election. During an interview on a late-night talk show, Mr Biden cited the president's claims that mail-in voting would result in widespread fraud. But he's confident the military would intervene if Mr Trump were to refuse to leave the White House.
I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
Yep. The same people, the same scare campaign, the same media, the same agenda. They are now seriously raising the prospect of needing the military to get Trump out of the White House. This is not just dumb politics and facile reporting. This is dangerous. This is the sort of nonsense that gives succour to the violent protesters. This is Twitter-level drivel. And when we come back to the protests and inflammatory issues of today, we see the same process, where the media seem to justify rather than condemn outrageous behaviour. Surely most of us are dismayed by protests that flout the very health rules, pandemic rules that have constrained our own lives and seen businesses shut and people lose their jobs. Surely we abhor any violence in any protest. And surely we're disgusted by people defacing or destroying statues and other memorials. But in the media, so often, we don't get a sense of those mainstream reactions. Instead, we get arguments to excuse the extremists. So on the weekend, with Christopher Columbus now and James Cook being the latest targets of statue vandals, they got support from from the political media class. That is, the vandals got support from the political media class. Writing in the Sydney Morning Herald, historian and ABC host Julia Baird said toppling statues enriched history. One of the more perplexing arguments made in recent days is that toppling, relocating or removing old statues amounts to the erasure of history, she opened her article. It is in fact the very opposite. It is history. This stuff is pretty hard to comprehend, isn't it? Yes, history is contestable. Yes, we should debate it. But tearing down public property, defacing statues, breaking the law, for what? On whose behalf? Why justify this stuff? Does Baird support the destruction of Aboriginal heritage sites? I'd guess not. How would she feel if some traditional owners vandalised her home for being built on their land? I mean, where does the media draw the line if not at respect for the law and respect for the property of others?